In this example, you're going to be building a custom process step for FlowWright using Visual Studio. So let me go ahead and open up Visual Studio. In my case, I'm going to be using uh, Microsoft Visual Studio 2022. Once Visual Studio opens up, we are going to create a brand new project. So click on Create a New Project. And we're going to go ahead and select to do Windows, and then we'll do a library. And we want to select the one here that says class library project for creating .NET or .NET Standard. You'll see there are other options also. Since FlowWright 10 is on completely on .NET Core, we want to be able to select .NET Core. There is another project you will see of a framework also. We don't want to select that. FlowWright 10 is completely on .NET Core. So we're going to go ahead and select that, and I'm going to give the project name as FW10. Let's say custom items. And we can keep the same stuff here for the rest of the selections. And in this particular here, I have to select framework. And on this, I'm going to select .NET Core 7.0. And go ahead and say create. So this should take a second or so to create the project in Visual Studio, and it will open up with this particular class file. And in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to first, since we're going to create a step, a process step, we need to also include the NuGet package for the FlowWright 10 API. So I'm just going to go ahead and right click on this project and say manage NuGet packages. Currently, when I'm building this video, FlowWright 10 is still in beta and only to a select number of customers. So I'm going to go ahead and search for FlowWright. And you'll see a couple of different API NuGet packages will come here. You want to select the one that says FlowWright API 10. And if you don't see this option, make sure you click this option that says include pre-release, and you will see this option. If it's selected, this one will show up also. So now what I can do is I can go ahead and say select to install this, and click, and it will install all these other items with this particular package. And so now the FlowWright 10 API is ready to go. Okay. So in this case, since we are building a process step, and let's call this step, I'm going to say FW add two numbers. Yeah, that's my class name, and you can see it automatically changed this to. When we are building a process step, the number one thing to do is we want to implement a certain interface. And in FlowWright 10, we have modified some of the namespaces, and we have modified some of the interface names. So you will see that in this case, we're going to be implementing FWI step interface, which also comes from the FlowWright engine. So you're going to get a bunch of highlights here that's saying this is not found, and add a reference and all that stuff. So here we are going to add a reference to the FlowWright engine, using FlowWright engine. And again, this is going to be highlighted again because you actually have to implement this interface, and Visual Studio can do that for you automatically. All you have to do is click on this selection and say implement interface. We have a very simple interface here. So you can see we have a public method that needs to be implemented. And before we do that, we also want to include some metadata for this step. And this metadata helps us configure this step automatically within FlowWright. So I'm going to put some attributes here, and I'm going to put FW. Uh, so I'm going to use step data where I'm going to describe this step. So the step name, I can give it a different name. In this case, I'm just going to keep it as FW add two numbers. And I'm just going to give a blank for the name and it will use the class name. And here I can also give a description. I'm going to say add two numbers. And I can also give a step category. And in this case, let's put FW10 as the category name. And that's it. I can also give a display name if I want for the toolbox, but I don't have to if it will use the description as the display name. The next thing I'm going to define is the inputs to this. So I'm going to define an input called step input, and the input name is, let's say, value 1, and I'm going to give it a description saying enter value 1. And I'm going to also say this is required. And I'll put another attribute called value 2 into value 2. As you can see, I'm using GitHub Copilot, and it automatically wrote the next input for me. It's a very handy tool to use and very worthwhile to buy it. So in this case, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to also, so this step is going to take two numbers and compute the two numbers and store it in a field for us, or a variable for us. So in this case, let's say we are going to put another input, and in this input we are going to store in a variable. So I'm going to say var to store, and store result in variable, and this is also required. And the last thing I need to define is the returns from this step. So I'm going to put a step return, and let's just return true, and let's say true value, and you can see Visual Studio automatically wrote the next line for me, false value. So now we have describing this particular step all done. And now we are going to go ahead and implement this step. So in this case, I always like to put a try-catch block so we can log errors and things like that. So I'm just going to put try-catch and exception EX, and we'll fill in all the rest of the pieces. So in this case, we have to return a FW figure return. So I'm going to create FW figure return, or return equals new figure return, and by default I'm going to return the value true, and I'm going to return a step state value of complete. And let's put that also at the end here saying return or return. And now we can go implement the rest of the functionality in this step. So first thing we want to do is we want to get the value of value 1 and value 2. So let's say they're going to be integers. I'm going to say int value 1 is going to be equal to O engine context get figure property, and I'm going to use the type here. I'm going to say int, and my property name is value 1, and this should automatically write the code for my value 2 also. So I have value 2 here now, And next thing I want to do is I want to compute the sum of it results. So you can see it automatically wrote the code for me. So I'm going to say result is equal to value 1, value 2. Next, I want to get um, what variable I want to store this in. So I'm going to say string. Let's say variable to store, and engine context get fig property, and I'm going to say variable to store. And once we get the variable, we are going to go ahead and store that. We are going to say, or engine context update, let's say variable, and we can give a variable of a name, and we can give the result. So we can say result, and we are done this part. And if we have any kind of exception, we can tell the engine context to log that. So we're going to say, oh, engine context, we're going to say log message. And as you can see, there are a couple of constructors on this, but in this case, we'll use the one that's able to log, um, let's see if I have a error. Okay, so we'll use the method called write error. And in this case, I can give a source name. So in this case, I'm going to give the source name is, typically I like to use the name of the class. So source is that. And in this case, I'm going to provide the exception. And then I'm going to give the logging level as, let's say, medium. And that's pretty much it that I have to give. And we are done building a custom step. So we have built a little custom step. Let's go ahead and compile this. So I'm going to say build, and the solution is built and the step is built. So you can see everything looks good. Now this has to be configured within FlowWright. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead to our debug directory and copy this DLL into the FlowWright directory. So I'm going to go ahead and say open folder in File Explorer. That should open up into our folder here. So let's go to bin and debug, and not net7, and we have our DLL. If you're in a development environment and building this, it's always better to copy the PDB file also. That way you will get a lot more logging if there's any issues. So now let's go ahead and copy this to our FlowWright directory. So I have my c:/FlowWright, and we're just going to copy it into this directory. So once we have copied, let's go to FlowWright, and let's just refresh the UI here. And so we are under administration steps, and let's go to utils, and let's say auto detect. Soon as we say auto detect, it should automatically pick up whatever custom steps we have not configured within FlowWright but exist in the file system. So you can see two steps showed up, and one of them is the one that I just wrote, and I can expand this, and I can also see the inputs. I can see the return values, all that is available. Now all I have to do is say manage and configure, and this will automatically configure this step within FlowWright. And so now it's configured. Let's go back and let's take a look. We should also see a new step category called FlowWright 10, FW10. So here it is. And you can see we have a new step here called add to numbers. And you can see it also, the validation is complaining that we don't have a step icon image. So in order to add an icon image, what you have to do is you have to you can take any icon image, and then you can you have to name that image as whatever the step name is. So I'm just going to go to my desktop here and take an image that I have already, and I'm going to give it a name of so I have this help, and so let me copy this, and I'm going to take this little icon I have and rename it from help to the name of my step. And now that we have done that, we can actually upload this image. So I'm going to go here and select the particular icon file. So desktop, modified. So I'm going to take this FW add two numbers PNG and say upload icon. And if you just refresh this page, you should see I have the icon showing up. Now what we can do is we can actually go and create a process instance, process definition, and then define a process, and then create an instance and execute it. So let me go to create process instances, and I'm going to go ahead and create a new definition called FW10 add two numbers, and that should open up Power Designer. As you can see, I have a step category called FW10, and my step is right here. I can drag that and drop that, and I can connect the two dots. So now I need to define a variable. So let's define a variable called result. You can call it anything you want. And it's going to be a number type, and we're going to add that. And now we can go and fill the rest of the properties. If you look at the properties, you can see that these properties, I have to enter values. So let's put 78, 23, 45. And here I can type variable dot result and save that. We're going to save the whole definition, and let me just reload it to make sure. Okay, icon was shown, and now we can go and create a new instance right from the designer to test this. So let's generate a name for it, and let's say create and execute. Right from here, we can also navigate to that particular instance. So you see view instance, and this will show the graphical execution. And you can see the status is completed at this point, and the step is executed. We can just go ahead and click on this particular step, and it will open up. And you can see in this step execution properties and their values. But we can also go to properties and see what they hold. So you can see value 1 is 78, value 2 is 45, and if we look at the result, which will be stored in the variables, you can see that the result is 123. And even if you look at the properties also, you can see that, because the property store result in variable has variable.result, and here's the translated value of that variable. So this is how easy to build a custom step to do anything you want. And we have customers building various different custom steps to perform calculations, logic, call web services and get data, or send data to a web service. You can make these steps do anything you want. Thank you for watching. Hope this helped you to understand how to build a custom process step in FlowWright 10.